Jackson on before the week is out to talk about that. I want to, hey, Andre, my god brother there, I hope that you all are doing well today. We're going to be talking about this explosion that killed so many people in Gaza. It just continues to get worse. Secretary Blinken was meeting at uh, the Senate yesterday, and he was interrupted multiple times, including by Medea Benjamin. Oh yeah, about uh, his full-throated support of Israel, as we see these more than 8,000 Palestinians are now dead, and no one wants to call for a ceasefire. Most Americans want a ceasefire. Most Americans want a ceasefire, and yet uh, most of the Congress, quite frankly, because of the monies that are in American politics, are unwilling to do so. They're unwilling to do so. You even have AOC voting present, present. But such is the pressure that is on you, to be fair, when you are in American politics. The mother's milk, Congressman Danny Davis said, of politics is money. Now, either we're going to campaign to end corporate and private money going into politics and have it all publicly funded so everybody gets the same amount of money to run their campaigns, or we're going to have the mess that we have now. You have the people you elect to vote against your interests because other people have put their money in. And guess what they do? Not only do they pour money into their coffers, they might not give you money. They didn't give Nina Turner money in Ohio. They poured money into her opponent, and they will find an opponent. If Congressman Jackson, Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, Congresswoman Kelly, Congressman Garcia, blah, 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 if they don't vote a particular way, and they have held strong, but I'm just saying, trust me, these entities will find people within our communities to run against the people who really want to champion us. But we've got to champion them, and we've got to get this kind of money out of politics. So I want you to think about that today, and not just think about it. We got to do something about it, because this is it's killing us. Americans want a ceasefire. Americans don't want any more money to go to Israel or anybody. No more guns. We're just going to stop this right now, because America has the power to stop this, to have a ceasefire declared. We're the only ones who are voting against the ceasefire in the UN. We're the only ones. We can stop this carnage. Now, Jewish people in the United States, these Jewish kids on these campuses, they feel insecure. They have every right to be, because they're being threatened. These Arab students, these kids who support a two-state solution, who are supportive of Palestinian peoples, they are being investigated. They are being denied jobs. They're being told, you're not going to get employed. Is this the kind of America that we want? Call me at 773-763-9278. Hey, Michael, Ann, and Jewel, and Miss Wanda, sending you my love. And I love Mr. Corey. Let him know that. Give him a big kiss for me this morning. Johnny D, everybody like and share the show. Like and share the show. Before we get to the good news, let us get to the rest of the story. FBI Director Christopher Wray said yesterday that anti-Semitism is reaching, quote, historic levels, close quote, in the United States as the war between Israel and Hamas intensifies. Quote, our statistics would indicate that for a group that represents only about 2.4% of the American public, they account for something like 60% of all religious-based hate crimes, close quote, Ray said of the Jewish American population. The Anti-Defamation League reported over 300 anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. since the Hamas attack on October 7, because people are conflating Israel with all Jewish Americans, whether they are secular or religious or ethnic. Oh boy, it just continues to get worse. New details are emerging about the U.S. Army reservist Robert Card, 40 years of age, who authorities say killed 18 people in Lewiston, Maine last week, including previous warning signs about him from the Army and his family. The Army in July said that the 40-year-old gunman, quote, should not have a weapon, handle ammunition, and participate in live fire activity, close quote, after he was seen, quote, behaving erratically, close quote, and sent for an evaluation at an Army hospital, according to an Army spokesman. Additionally, several attempts were made by officers to check on him weeks before the mass shootings, raising questions over authorities' handling of the warnings and his access to firearms. The cost of job based healthcare coverage might see a steep rise in 2024 due to stubbornly high inflation. Benefits consultants say companies plan to shoulder most of the increase, but many workers could also feel the pinch in the form of higher premiums and out of pocket expenses. And those are some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. We're going to have a high of 42 degrees here in Chicago, mostly sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 38 degrees, partly cloudy in Major League Baseball. The Rangers are one game away from seizing the World Series. They're leading that series 3-1 over the Diamondbacks, and they did not disappoint last night. If you're pulling for them, 11-7 over the Diamondbacks. Wow. In the NBA, the Bulls will be playing the Mavericks tonight, and the Nuggets will be facing off against the Timberwolves. And those are some of the headlines. Pastor Vicki Johnson, how are you today?
I am well, Santita. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm doing well. I need some good news. It seems like when I go to bed and when I wake up, I'm hearing about death and destruction all over the place. It's just very hard to take it all in, you know?
Yes, it is. And it is very much a part of our daily lives. As a matter of fact, it is a part of our good news for today.
Thank God. First of all, how can we worship with you on Sunday? Because we need to do that too.
Amen. You can worship with me at Lebanon Lutheran on 131 South Manistee in Chicago at 9 a.m. on Sundays, and then again at 11:30 a.m. at St. Thomas Lutheran at 80th and Jeffrey Boulevard. In both services can be seen on Facebook.
All right. Well, let's get to the good news.
All right. Good morning, Santita, and good morning to all of your morning stars and friends. There is good news. Today is All Saints Day, a tender day in the life of God's people. It is set aside as a festival day when we commemorate the saints who have gone before us, completing their baptismal journey in Christ. When we say saints, we are not talking about perfect people, but we are speaking of people like you and me who have made their transition. On this day, we speak truth no matter how much time has passed. Death still stings. Yet we remember our deceased dear ones in tandem with God's eternal promise. We remember some of the ones that we have mentioned just this year on this show who have passed away. We remember Professor Kenneth Woods, Rudolph Isley, Richard Roundtree, better known as Shaft, Lena Johnson McLean, Vernon Oliver Price, and our dear friend and a friend to this program, L. Stanley Davis, and so many others. It is important to remember, even though with remembering there can come some pain, but also look for the joy as we remember those who have made the complete cycle that we too one day must make. Remembering is a gift from God. And as long as you have that ability, take advantage of it. For one day, you will want someone to remember you. If you will do this, and I believe that you will, especially on this day, then to me, that's good news.
I love that. And thank you for that. I needed that today. Because a lot of people are passing on into eternity. And they're not passing on, they're being killed. But
Hmm.
there is eternal life, and many of
Yes.
us act as if this is eternal, this is permanent, and heaven is
Nope.
impermanent. And that is untrue. So, I mean, would you explain
Yeah.
that? Would you explain that to us?
Well, we this whole spiritual journey, we are more than the bodies that we see, and we become so caught up in the physical. And let's look at this, that you can't even see yourself, your face, without having a reflective device. That lets you know that this body is temporal and that it's not what is important, but it's our spirit, our souls that are important. And that's where the investment of our energy and our time needs to go, in building up our spiritual selves so that we can be a reflection of God, that we can live the lives that God is calling us to live, where we are doing God's work with our hands.
So today, as we are looking at war, and as you see America not calling for peace, refusing to do that, and the Bible tells you that blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed.
Hmm.
It makes me tremble for us because many of us don't want justice as much as we want vengeance. And I
Hmm.
think that's why we've been talking about this today. We've been talking about this for days because I always felt that this conflict in the Middle East was a very human conflict. It's at the source of who we are: forgiveness, unforgiveness, justice, vengeance. Um, uh, your opponent is always a reflection of who you are, whether you like it or not. I mean, that's the way the Lord works it out. You either
Hmm.
have a seat at the table or you are on the menu. The point is, y'all are both at the table. And you got a seat at the table in the presence of your enemy, because guess what? Your enemy is God's child too. And,
Right.
and
Right.
and I'm just wondering if we get any of that, Pastor. I mean, because I just really feel that human beings are at a crossroads.
Yes, we are. We are at crossroads, and yes, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God, instead of being called everything else under the sun. But peace takes work. It takes a lot of work. Peace takes the ability to sit and listen, as opposed to always speaking and pushing your part. Peace requires a give and a take. And when we are only pushing our agenda, when we are only thinking about what is best for us, then there will be no peace. We must have an open heart, a listening ear. Your father had to go in various situations and be the mediator so that there could be peace, and people could be released from dangerous situations. And so it is important for us to learn how to sit back, listen, not just quote the scripture, blessed are peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God, but to actually be peace in action.
Hmm. Everybody, we have to be what we're looking for.
Mm.
We really, that's one of the things that that Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman helped to teach us. That, wait a minute, you are your thoughts. You are your thoughts.
Yeah.
And I thank her for those teachings. Miss some of those wonderful, wonderful, great spiritual teachers that we have had down through the years. But that having been said, we need everybody now, all hands on deck, because uh, we're watching uh, people who are they're bent on destroying folks. I mean, the IDF said we're not looking for accuracy, we're looking for damage. So when you say you drop a bomb
Mm.
on a village of people, well, we were dropping the bomb deep enough because we believed that the leader of Hamas was deep down in the tunnels. So they're not finding people. They're finding people, but they're not finding bodies. They're finding body parts. That is not the way this is supposed to go, everybody. We're not supposed to be seeking vengeance. We're supposed to be seeking justice. If we're seeking vengeance, we're doing something else. And that's wrong. And ultimately, God told us, if you will pardon me, the justice is mine. Vengeance is mine. Leave that to me.
Vengeance is mine.
Yes. Leave it to me. I'll work it out. You just go on and do the right thing. And I keep talking about this because it grieves me, because I see where this is going. And every day I don't hear anyone in our administration. I hear the muted members of Congress because of the money, because either they've had money poured into their coffers, or guess what? They have been assured that someone will be run against them to put them out of office. That's the way this is working. Let's talk about that, everybody. Let's talk about war crimes. Do you drop a bomb on a village where you know people are living so you can penetrate the tunnels? Are you serious? Back in just a minute on the Santita Johnson Show. Pastor, it's just a lot. Just as I heard more of the reports yesterday, I just got sicker.
Yes.
I was like, wait a minute, you're just killing people. Are you serious right now? You can't do that.
Right. It's very disheartening and disturbing. And what's even more disturbing is that we just it just becomes a news clip for those of us who have the power to speak our voices out, to cause something to happen in Congress that would bring an end to this. It's very disheartening.
Well, I can tell you, I know they're looking, and they will come up with someone who's very attractive to run against Congressman Jackson, to run against Delia Ramirez, to run against Ilhan Omar. That's what they do. I know how the game works. They put money into these people. That's what happened to Senator Nina Turner in Ohio. Yes.
Hi, Ms. Jackson. We have Attorney Hoffler and Dr. Uri ready to go.
Okay. Hey, Attorney Hoffler, how you doing?
Good morning, Santita. How are you?
Very disturbed by what I'm seeing this morning, but here we go.
Yeah.
But I want you to look at Pastor Uri. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Great. Sound so. Now you better sound happier than that today. Now, come on, give me hello. How are you? Hello.
Good morning, Todd.
Good morning, Santita.
Yeah,
How are you?
You gonna fix that? I'm sounding like my mama Helen right now. Stop it. I mean, enough of that. Hello.
You said you were.
No,
I heard you say you were disturbed by what you were hearing. I'm listening.
Just say, girl, give me a word of encouragement, Pastor. What's all this? Gotta mess with Todd. I'm like, yo. So
2 minutes.
Thank you very much. And we are going to find that. Let me find this. Okay. 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 Okay, how much time do we have? I need you to count me in, honey.
90 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Just so I get a sense, because you have the accurate clock. I do not. I have the time.gov, but sometimes in these radio stations you're off by about 2 or 3 seconds, and that makes a big difference. Okay. Okay.
Of course.
Okay.
Thirty seconds.
Your picture?
Stand by.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta
3, 2, 1.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, Wednesday, November 1st, 2023. Can you believe we're 3 weeks away from Thanksgiving? We are, which puts us, 7 weeks from Christmas, 8 weeks until the end of the year. And then, whoa, the presidential campaign is on and cracking. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. Most Americans want a ceasefire. Why don't we have one? Why does the United States keep voting against a ceasefire in the UN? Why are we not pushing harder for humanitarian aid to get through? Typically, Gaza needs more than 500 trucks full of humanitarian aid every day. They're getting 20, 30 trucks, maybe. And this is the largest open air prison. Some people are calling it a concentration camp in the world. And more than 8,000 of them have been killed. They didn't die, they've been killed. And yesterday, something extremely disturbing happened. An Israeli strike, according to the CNN report, targeting a Hamas commander, I'm reading from the report, in the densely populated refugee camp in northern Gaza, has left catastrophic damage and killed a large number of people, according to eyewitnesses and medics in the enclave. They said children were carrying other children. They did not find bodies as much as they found body parts. And the IDF said that they were dropping the bomb with such intensity because they were trying to penetrate the building or the camp so they could get down into the tunnels. So, of course, people were pulverized. So survivors and eyewitnesses, the report continues, spoke of apocalyptic scenes in the aftermath of the spike, which tore a massive crater through the middle of this camp. An eyewitness, Muhammad Ibrahim, said, quote, I was waiting in line to buy bread when suddenly, without any prior warning, 7 to 8 missiles fell. He said there were 7 to 8 huge holes in the ground full of killed people, body parts all over the place. It felt like the end of the world, close quote. According to a statement by the Israeli Defense Forces, the airstrike targeted and killed Ibrahim Biari, whom it described as one of the Hamas commanders responsible for the October 7th attack on Israel, which left more than 1,400 dead and hundreds taken hostage, a couple hundred. So I want to know what your thoughts are about this. And the reason I'm bringing this up, we're bringing Legal Q&A with CK up a little early today. We're going to have Dr. Francis Boyle on in the next hour to talk about war crimes and the ICC, of which America is not a signatory. They typically go after people of color. They don't go after Western Europeans, of which America is really considered to be a part. At Tucker Carlson, I look at some of everything, Reverend Dr. Yeary and Attorney C.K. Hoffler, because I try to get information, and I'm, and I listen to the right, the left, the in between, the outside, because whatever your opinion, whatever your news source was, I can go to it and I can form my own. You understand what I mean, CK? So that's what I really try to do. Because I want the information. I did not know that Hezbollah one of the one of the largest gatherings of their cells is just to the south of us in Mexico. I mean, they're like right here, CK. I mean, as our borders are open, as people are just pouring through, they're right here. And we keep playing with people as if they don't have feelings, as if they don't have loved ones. As I was pulling together, I was talking to several people, uh, Palestinian and people who are Palestinian American and Jewish Americans who have Israeli relatives and Palestinian Americans who have Palestinian relatives. One of the persons I spoke to yesterday, actually, I asked him, "How's your family?" He said, "Well, they're okay, but one of my cousins is a hostage." Oh boy, it just stopped my heart for him. Then Raid Jarrar, who's going to be on with us, CK, he's lost 39. Well, I'm going to have tomorrow another man who's lost 39 members of his family. 39, CK. 39. I mean, just the death and destruction is just unbelievable. And then to strike, you tell people to go, people gather in these refugee camps, CK. And I'm bringing this to you because you have worked with governments all over the world as they have secured their independence, as they have sought to become democratic or certainly move away from colonialism. I mean, you've seen governments formed. You've seen a lot. You've seen people who've been guilty of war crimes. You've seen it all. What do you make of this? Just dropping a bomb and it just pulverizes people because you're trying to find one person when you know hundreds of people live in this spot.
Santita, I mean, they're really, what do I make of it? It's a horrific tragedy. That's the understatement of the century, actually. We're watching really basically the elimination of a people and the destruction of an area where people were living their homes. And, I know that you're going to have someone that's going to come on and talk about the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and war crimes. But there are organizations, many non-governmental organizations such as Amnesty International and others that monitor throughout the world what's happening. And when they see situations where there are war crimes being committed, civilians that are being targeted or civilian populations that are the victims, they issue reports, they issue findings, they go into those areas because they want to ensure that even when you have war, that civilians are being treated according to the international conventions and protocols. Because there are some protocols, believe it or not, when it comes to war. For instance, and all of this is relevant, and these are legal documents, these are legal structures, these are legal protocols. When there is war, and if you are about to bomb a building, for instance, you are supposed to issue warnings to the civilians. Well, as I've always said, as we all know, this is, again, understatement of the century, there are not going to be any winners in war. No one is going to win in war because if you think about it, for those who are going to bomb buildings or hospitals or anything like that, if they give a warning to the civilians, they might very well warn the person or the people that they're trying to target. So it doesn't happen the way that it should. But the international conventions say that if you're going to bomb a building where there's civilians versus a military establishment or where a military camp is. So in war, it's never good. But if there's a military target, that's different than a civilian target. That's why the focus, even in the press that is slowly covering this, it may not be equal coverage, but there is some coverage. They're focusing on the civilian casualties. Why? Because there are wartime conventions that are being violated by, it appears, both sides. Now, certainly Israel, the Israeli Defensive Forces are in a much stronger position than Hamas. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. We know that. It's always been the case. When people talk about the Gaza Strip and the conditions pre what has recently happened, pre this war, and again, this is a war, the conditions there were horrific. Most people in this country would never consider living in those conditions. But and so I think it's hard for us to understand the context of this war that we are in. So the fact that civilian buildings or places where civilians are being bombed, the fact that a refugee camp, this is really important. A refugee camp, when civilians are given warnings, because there have been some warnings, by the way, given by the Israeli Defense Forces. They have been. There have been some warnings, and so people are evacuating. They evacuate to places of safety, of security. And one of those places is a refugee camp. You go, they have them all around the world, places where people who are victims of war can go for refuge, go for safety, go to get humanitarian assistance. And these are the innocent civilians, women, children, and men too, who are victims of war. So they leave their homes because their homes are being targeted and bombed, and they go to these places to seek refuge, safety, food, shelter. So when a refugee camp is bombed, is targeted, for whatever reason, that, according to Amnesty International and other international organizations, including the United Nations, is perceived as one of the more horrific examples of war crimes. So that is, and again, we have to not look at this the way Americans process information as much, because we know that our brave men and women, they are deployed. They've been deployed. We know that. We understand that. So it puts us in a very difficult position, an awkward position. I'm talking about everyday folks. I'm not talking about people who are in government and people who are in the decision-making capacity. Because our children, our American men and women are already deployed over there, and we are facing what I believe is the escalation to potentially a world war in today's environment, not in the 1940s, but in today's environment will be a nuclear war. Countries have already articulated. The United Nations has already taken a position, and there are many member nations, including the United States, that they are not going to tolerate the destruction and the occupation of the Gaza Strip. So when there are countries that have nuclear capabilities, that have incredible military capabilities, that are taking the position contrary to the occupation, the bombing, the decimation, the destruction of the Gaza Strip, and the complete eradication and displacement of Palestinians, we are seeing that there's going to be an escalation to what I believe is going to be a world war. Why is that important, and why should people, Santita, be listening to this? Because your kids have been deployed over there. I know someone who's been deployed. I dare say everyone knows someone who's been deployed to position, because this is escalating and creeping up to a world war. That is devastating. That is going to devastate us here in this country, because sometimes we want to just look at what's going on over here. It's going to come to our shores. It's at our shores. It's going to devastate us unless there is a change. There are not going to be any winners in this, because you can't eliminate an entire population. You can't. It's impossible.
Well,
that's why the world wars have never been successful.
What about the document? It was, it was really, they were just thinking it through. One of the Israeli governmental ministries was talking about how this document discusses how Egypt they wanted to move all of the Palestinians to Egypt. And so when you look at the countries surrounding who the Arab countries who could receive the Palestinians, and when you see Egypt in particular pushing back, they're saying, no, because once they come here, you're never going to let them come back home. It's just like gentrification, right? That, they always tell you, we're going to fix the place, then we're going to have mixed income housing, and then some of you can come back. It never happens. It never happens. And they're calling this an ethnic cleansing. What is that technically?
Well, they're calling it ethnic cleansing, and they're calling it genocide. Ethnic cleansing is when you have and we've seen this throughout the world, where you have one group that is deciding that they want to cleanse, get rid of, destroy another group based on ethnic differences. It could be based on, as we saw it, one of the cases in Africa that we saw a lot, I think that came to our attention was Rwanda, when there was ethnic cleansing in Rwanda, where people, because they were of different ethnic groups, one decided they needed to eliminate the other. When I say eliminate, kill, destroy, annihilate. So that's ethnic cleansing. Genocide is the killing. There's homicide, which is killing. Genocide is the killing based on really one's ethnicity, one's genealogy, one's participation. You're born into this world. You don't have a choice when you're born into this world of what ethnicity you're going to belong to. But in countries where there are conflicts based on just being a part of a different culture, and sometimes genocide happens in a country, and there are many people who believe that there, in some instances, has been some form of genocide even here in the United States. But in terms of the international ramifications of genocide, it is a complete destruction, annihilation, and cleansing of and getting rid of a group of people. And I don't think a lot of people in this country can appreciate what it means and how it happens. And it happens actually quite frequently in the world. There are those who, like an example of genocide is also the Holocaust. That was ethnic cleansing. That was genocide. During the time of Hitler, he wanted to get rid of all the Jews. Period. End of discussion. All of that, quite frankly, is what led to the creation of Israel, the creation of that state, a place for Jews to be able to go that were victims of the Holocaust, and that were just systematically, it wasn't just in Germany, because it spread throughout other countries in Europe, were being eliminated, were being killed, were being annihilated. So that's what genocide is, where you are identifying people and you're killing them. You're trying to eliminate a race, a group, a cultural group based on their characteristics. Is it illegal? Of course it is. Is it a war crime? Of course it is. Is it something that we should tolerate? No. And if you want to know the exact definition, it's the deliberate, so it's not accidental, deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. I'm underscoring deliberate because it's intentional, it's targeted. I'm underscoring destroying because the goal is to annihilate, eliminate, get rid of. Well, we've seen it's no different than people in this country when Africans came over, hit the shores. There was no genocide attempted because we were needed, the Africans were needed for labor. That was a business decision to be on the plantations, to run things, to build things. That's different. Mm-hmm. That's slavery. That's legal. That's legal, and it was legal in this country at the time. Genocide is the complete annihilation and the killing, deliberate, and that's what some are. Amnesty International, the United Nations, and other international organizations are saying it's happening right now as we speak, as it relates to Palestinians.
Well, let me ask.
So,
okay. No, because I wanted to ask.
So I'm just giving you the definitions and their legal ramifications. Their legal ramifications.
No, I mean that's key. But this leads me to the moral. Pamela Garrison is asking a couple of really profound questions today, Pastor. She said, do we want vengeance over peace? Do we as human beings create circumstances that require us to seek vengeance? I think that's those are some really interesting concepts to bring into this discussion. Pastor Yuri?
Well, it is an important question. The challenge is it's intertwined with political realities, political motivations. And so that's why you hear the cry for a ceasefire at the same time that there is a bomb dropped on a refugee camp. And the justification is kind of flowing from the eye for an eye. They took hostages. Therefore, we get to impose our will as retribution. And at the same time, and we've talked about this for many weeks now, since October 7th, that the Hamas act on October 7th is really pretextual for mass displacement and the reclaiming of land. And as I was just looking this morning at the status, the crossing into Egypt has opened, and they expect a mere 500 or so folks to be able to leave Gaza into Egypt today. At that pace, what they're creating and what they're demanding, here's the issue about we're going to give you a warning, leave the north, go to the south. I heard an IDF officer say, we gave them a warning to leave and go to the south before we dropped the bomb. Therefore, we've satisfied our obligations under the Geneva Convention. That does not get to the motivation. If the objective is to remedy what has occurred to me, it does not allow me morally or even according to international law to expand what is necessary to be able to get what we might otherwise call justice. And so we are now seeing play out what is going to be the mass claiming of land, the displacement, now arguing that in this concept paper that Palestinian people should find themselves staying in the Sinai Peninsula and over in Egypt, that somehow is justifiable. That's the particular challenge, and that's why the moral issue is so critical, because if there is no moral compass, this is going to continue to expand. And the question becomes, to CK's point, is what's going on with pulling in other players in the region in response to it. So there is likely to be an escalation. And let's just be real clear, when CK is talking about a world war, that's about who's engaged, right? Everybody's kind of engaged. It may not be on all fronts, and it may not take the same form on all fronts, but it's going to be on such scale that you're going to see multiple nations, significant world players, major industrial countries, the top economic powers are going to be engaged in this conflict. But the issue is, what are we in conflict over? And how are we going to know when the conflict has been resolved? That's where the moral clarity, if there's no driver to understand how have I been harmed, therefore how must I be restored? Now what we're doing is we're really going blind, because we're going to gouge everybody's eyes out, and we're not going to be able to see the forest for the trees, because we've lost our sense of moral suasion in this moment to really kind of say, let everybody kind of take a step back and let's get to the substance of what the conflict is about. That's why you have to have a ceasefire. You cannot get to that kind of important moral conversation while the conflict is escalating, the grieving is expanding, the death is just beyond anybody's ability to really kind of comprehend. And you haven't really seen the images, the real images. You've seen some images, but you have not seen the real images of what warfare does, not only to the human body, but to the human psyche, to the human spirit. That's the piece that I think for those of us who are watching from afar, we don't always get a true sense of it. So, Santita, to your point about listening to and checking other media outlets, we get the sanitized version of what that conflict looks like.
Well, that's
It
why
is
to
not
hear
the version of what's going on the ground.
Absolutely. I mean, and you're a veteran. I mean, and that's why to hear this man say it felt like it was the end of the world. And we're not finding bodies, we're finding body parts. And please, everyone, do not invoke Dr. King's name here. I heard Jay Johnson, the former head of Homeland Security, bless his heart, he said, Dr. King preached nonviolence. Well, that's true, but Dr. King practiced nonviolence more than that. He didn't drop a bomb. He didn't kill a soul. So it goes beyond preaching. It's about practicing. So let's practice. Really stopping. I'm about to go to this break and we can talk about it, CK. You don't need to drop any bombs. The Carter Center said there will be no military solution. We cannot learn to live we'll never learn to live together if we are killing each other's children. That is what President Jimmy Carter said, the only U.S. president to say that Israel was an apartheid state. They're human beings and they're hurt people. And hurt people hurt people. Clearly, they haven't processed all their pain from the Second World War and all of the millennia that they've been through. But you know what? Now is the time for everybody to get on track. Because we can't just kill people. You can't pulverize people. You cannot drop a bomb where people have gathered to seek refuge. And you drop a bomb, you drop 7 or 8 bombs that are so powerful that they penetrate the people to get down into the tunnels. So you don't even have bodies anymore. You have pulp. Are you serious? Did you see the parents standing out there running, trying to say, wait a minute, this is where we used to live. My baby is in there. Children were carrying out children. And it's our money that's making it all possible. Not right. And Hezbollah is to the south. They have many cells down in Mexico, according to Lieutenant Douglas McGregor. What are we doing? What are we doing? Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station and the voice of progressive Minnesota. AM 950 radio. Back in just a minute. I'm sorry, CK, did you want to say? I was eating up time before I got out.
No. It's superb. There's just so much to talk about. I just wanted people here to understand that even here, the Department of Justice, we prohibit, there's a specific code on genocide. And I didn't get a chance to read this because people think, oh, that's something that's happening there. No, it's happening here. Even in this country, we prohibit genocide, whether committed in time of peace or time of war. And we define it, the U.S. government, our people define it as violent attacks. It includes violent attacks with specific intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group.
We have Attorney Fancher on the line.
Diction, of course, if it's committed in the U.S., and there are those who believe that, there's been some genocide that's committed in the U.S. in the past. And there's also federal extraterritorial jurisdiction when the offender is a national of the United States. So we and other countries, every country defines genocide basically the same way. I don't want anyone to believe that that's something that is way over there because the conflict is that way. We recognize and understand genocide, torture, trafficking of arms, identifying civilians in a time of war, but in the United States, or peace. So now they're in a war there. But even if you don't believe that what's happening in Gaza and Israel is a war, under our laws in this country, we would prohibit genocide in a time of peace. This is very, very serious. And I know that everybody knows it's serious because we're all seeing, even on Prime or on corporate media, mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, we're seeing more accounts of this. We're just not seeing the full picture. And we're not going to see the full picture because that's just part of the way war is reported in terms of U.S. press. But if you go to BBC, if you go to other international outlets, you will see really the ravages of this war. And it's like it's very, very difficult to watch. It's more difficult to watch than when we're seeing mass shootings, because while this is happening, there are mass shootings and all kinds of issues continue to happen in our communities here. Right here, people being displaced right here, people starving right here, homeless populations growing right here, more and more young kids being involved in heinous criminal acts right here on our streets every day. Just really deficient, the moral and you talked about the moral aspects of war. We're fighting a different kind of war in this country. But certainly watching on TV and knowing what's happening to Black and brown people across the seas is certainly something that is demoralizing and piles up on the sense of hopelessness and helplessness that many people feel. So, and it's coming to our shores. It's really at our shores.
It's here.
Because you can't eradicate, you can't destroy, you can't get rid of a group of people, an ethnic, racial, or religious group of people. We know this. That's why we've had all these world wars, and that's why the world is there's always some war going on in the world. We've seen ethnic cleansing before, and again, there are no winners. Who did the first? Who did the first? Who threw the first bullet? Who shot the first bullet? Well, we know what happened on October 7th. So people will say, "Well, Hamas started this." That's what some people will say, but other people, in response to that, will say, "Well, Hamas. This is a constant state of just warfare that's been happening between Israel and Gaza, between Israelis and Palestinians. And so if there is not a de-escalation, if there is not some form of a real de-escalation means when you're in war, you've got to de-escalate. Either you cease fire, meaning you stop war where there's an agreement between the parties, or it's going to evolve into and escalate into something that resembles today's version of a world war. And it's a world war because it's not just confined to that one, a country. It's not confined to Israel and to Gaza. It is now spreading throughout the region and throughout the world, where countries are taking sides actively and pledging their military capabilities to help the Palestinians.
Well, they've done that. I mean, and the fact is,
or to support Israel.
I
Or to
paid
support
it.
Israel.
I hear
One
you.
side or the other. That's
I hear you, but you've got the global South who have lined up and who are aligning with. I mean, you got Russia and China. I'm telling you how this thing is playing out. I mean, I don't need to tell you. I'm just saying, here we are. We're here. We're here. And I mean, and when I saw this man, because I told you I listened to everything. And I've found his assessments to be quite interesting. Lieutenant Colonel Douglas McGregor.
Back in 90.
He said, "Thank you so much." He said, "Look, Hezbollah, one of the largest gathering of their cells in the world is in Mexico." I said, "Oh, whoa, I didn't know that." So wait a minute, huh? No one told me that. No one told me that Hezbollah was right to the south. CK and Mark Fancher, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning.
Oh, so glad that you're here with us today.
Back in 60.
Okay.
Santita, how's your dad doing?
You know, he's doing well. Thank God. I'm going to see him shortly, actually. Not too long after I get off the air, a couple hours. Praise the Lord. And I can actually see him. Hallelujah. And there is that. So let me pull these. Let me pull my live read. Let me get to my stuff. Okay, gonna roll right on through all of this, everybody. Ooh. You know, I mean, they're telling us not to fly in the United States, okay? Like, we act like this thing is just, well, no, I mean, I think a lot of people are waking up to the gravity of this situation and how we all have skin in the game. So, you know, because I've seen some people say, you know,
Stand
no
by.
one is crying for African children. I cry for African children and talk about Africa.
We
all
can
the time.
change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Wednesday, November 1st, 2023. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And I want you to meet my Morning Star family over on YouTube on the Santita Jackson Show channel. Everybody like and share. Please like and share right now. Everybody like and share. Jewel. Everybody like and share. Like and share. Robert, Andre, like and share. Donnie. Everybody like and share. Like and share. Let's talk about what's happening in the Middle East. Let's talk about this bombing of this refugee camp where they didn't find bodies. They found body parts. Got to talk about that. Let's talk about war crimes. Let's talk about the ceasefire that Americans want that Congress refuses to affirm because of the money, quite frankly. Either money has been poured into their campaign coffers or they rightfully are wary of someone who's going to be put in a race who will be funded by the monies that would oppose this ceasefire. That's the way that works. That's what happened to Nina Turner in Ohio. It almost happened to Reverend Jackson when he ran for president, but he kept pushing and registering people to vote. If he hadn't been registering people to vote, and if he had not had such strength, his campaign would have been destroyed too by these same forces. Let's get to some of these headlines. An Israeli strike on a refugee camp in northern Gaza caused many casualties and left catastrophic damage, according to medics in the enclave. Israeli forces claim that the strike killed a top Hamas commander responsible for the October 7th attack on Israel. However, Hamas denied the presence of one of its leaders at the camp, who would have been down in the tunnels, by the way. A hospital director estimated that scores were killed in the strike on Tuesday, which left massive craters among the densely populated buildings. And we will be talking about that in just a few minutes. In the meantime, FBI Director Christopher Wray said Tuesday that anti-Semitism is reaching historic levels, as he put it, in the U.S. as the war between Israel and Hamas intensifies. Quote, our statistics would indicate that for a group that represents only 2.4% of the American public, they account for something like 60% of all religious-based hate crimes, close quote. Ray said of the Jewish American population, the Anti-Defamation League reported over 300 anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. since the Hamas attack on October 7th. College campuses are seeing an increase in anti-Semitic activity as well. And in the meantime, you're watching pro-Palestinian students who are being denied employment, who are being harassed on these campuses, who will not be allowed to work once they graduate from school. It's not a pretty atmosphere, everybody. New details are emerging about U.S. Army reservist Robert Card, 40 years of age, who authorities say killed 18 people in Lewiston, Maine last week, including previous warning signs about him from the Army and his family. The Army in July said that the 40-year-old gunman, quote, should not have a weapon, handle ammunition, and should not participate in live fire activity, close quote, after he was seen, quote, behaving erratically, close quote, and was sent for an evaluation at an Army hospital. This is in July, everybody. Additionally, several attempts were made by the officers to check on him weeks before the mass shootings, raising questions over authorities' handling of the warnings and his access to firearms, everybody. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 42 degrees, mostly sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 38 degrees, partly sunny, partly cloudy, Major League Baseball, the Rangers are one win away from being the World Series champions. They increased their lead 3-1 in the World Series stakes last night. They won over the Diamondbacks 11-7. NFL uncharacteristically had a night off. In the NBA, the Bulls will be playing the Mavericks and the Nuggets will be playing the Timberwolves. Everybody closer to home. Generally you need a lot of money to put down on a house. A lot of money to put down on a house. And so in 99% of the counties in the United States, Americans cannot afford to buy a home. Can you believe that? Oh, it's tough. But I want you to reach out to Team Hochberg because they have a new program where you only need 1% down and no private mortgage insurance. That's right. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID. It is not too good to be true. You need to call them and find out about this program. They are your trusted local lender. Up until now, saving for a down payment has just been next to impossible. And the largest challenge, this has been the largest challenge that borrowers have faced when trying to buy a home. Team Hochberg now has a loan to help listeners who qualify overcome this challenge. You will only need 1% down, 1% down. Team Hochberg wants to help you, your friends, your family, coworkers, neighbors, your kids are coming out of school, your kids who are working and who just want to buy a home, and not just want to buy a home. They want the equity, they want the financial stability that the wealth accrual that getting a home can give them, everybody. So I want you to reach out to Team Hochberg and see if you qualify for this program where you only need 1% down, 1% down. If you get a place that's $100,000, that is $1,000. That's all you'll need to get a home. 200,000. You need $2,000. That, and they can also help you to build your credit with this new credit card that they have, so that you can go from the 500s to the 600s to the 700s. Yes, call them. They have a lot of financial products that can be very helpful to you. Do yourself a favor. Call them at 855-56 David, 855-56 David. 1% down, you can own a home. You can get a credit card, a secured credit card, and you can begin to lift your credit score. They want to help Americans get up, and I support that. Team Hochberg, everybody. They've helped thousands of radio listeners, and they can help you too. You can secure financing on your new home. You can clean up your credit. You can build your credit. Call them at 855-56 David. We are welcoming on, of course, on Legal Q&A with CK. CK, we've got Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, who really helped us to understand, the moral dilemma in which we find ourselves, CK. Well, we've got attorney Mark Fancher. Now, he's got a take, and I cannot wait to hear what he's got to say, attorney CK Hoffler, and particularly in light, CK, of this Israeli ministry in a concept paper that proposed transferring Gaza citizens to Egypt's Sinai. That is what Egypt has been afraid would happen. They were afraid that these people would be ethnically cleansed, purged, removed from their homes, and recolonized to the Sinai. And so, CK, we've got to talk about this, because now with the dropping of these bombs yesterday, when this gentleman who witnessed it said it felt like the end of the world, and then he just saw lots of dead people. I cannot even imagine the trauma. Attorney CK Hoffler.
Santita, yeah, it's something that we can't imagine if we haven't been in the military and haven't been on the front lines of war. It's hard to imagine. And we haven't had war in this country in a long time, that kind of war. And so in our lifetimes, we haven't experienced that. Now, there's a different kind of war that we fight in this country, but that type of war we haven't experienced here. So it is difficult to imagine. It's the worst, because you're seeing women and children and people that are describing what's happening. And if it weren't for social media, and if it weren't for people recording this, we really wouldn't know a lot of this information. So what do we make of it? This is going to escalate if we don't de-escalate and stop it. It's going to escalate into something greater. There's no question. Egypt, the entire Middle East has seen this coming. This was what they predicted would happen, and this was the impetus for ceasefires in the past, and trying to find a solution in the past. But now we are way beyond where this conflict has ever been, and we're in a full-fledged war. Even if the artillery and the access to arms and to machinery and to military machinery are different, this is still a war.
Absolutely.
And so where are we, Santita? Where we are is if there's not a drastic step taken. And I think the U.S. has to be part of this drastic step taken to de-escalate and to stop this. We will escalate into a world war, and we're going to feel this more profoundly on our shores here in the United States.
Well,
we already have our troops that have been deployed.
Yeah, and Hezbollah's to the south. They're to the south. They're in Mexico. I mean, that has been established.
Right.
They don't want to talk about it in corporate media, but this is how vulnerable we are. CK, we got about 12 minutes left in the segment. I wanted to bring on attorney Mark Fancher.
Absolutely.
Get some of his feedback.
Absolutely. Mark, good morning, Attorney Fancher. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning.
We can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. This is a tragedy, so there are no winners here, but we definitely want to hear your analysis and how you feel we can change the dynamic, get out of this, because there's steps towards a ceasefire.
Well, I think that a good starting place for anybody that wants to look at this seriously is what's called the Rome Statute. It's the treaty that creates the International Criminal Court. And it specifies all of the kinds of things that people have been talking about generally, and it defines them: war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, all of those things in some detail. And what's notable is that the situation in Gaza is a living example of this document. there are so many of the offenses that are specified in that document that are being committed, including the one that was just referenced, which is the transfer of a population from Gaza, outside of that region. That is specifically defined and described as a crime against humanity under the Rome Statute. So even though the International Criminal Court has not been as effective as we would hope it would be, and in some cases it's been just downright unjust, we at least have the capacity to appreciate and understand the gravity of the crimes that are being committed in Gaza. And, that's just the transfer of populations. When we start looking at things like the bombing of hospitals, the bombing of refugee camps, it's all over this document. And so the crimes that are being committed are just extensive. They're unconscionable. They're beyond disturbing. They're really somewhat devastating to the collective psyche. And I think that very often there is some concern about whether there is some sort of special consideration and special concern, special empathy and sympathy for the victims of all of this. There is, and for good reason, not because these particular victims are in some way superior in their humanity than other victims around the world, but what's special about them is the perpetrators of the crimes that are being directed against them. We have the Israeli state, which is perpetrating these crimes in Gaza. We have the United States of America, which long ago abandoned the idea of putting its own soldiers in harm's way whenever possible, and it hides behind the aggression and the violence of armies of other countries. And you have, they're all complicit in a grand global imperialist operation, which is designed to enrich major corporations and wealthy families at the expense of the world's ordinary people. It is an operation that is intended to have no pity and no mercy whatsoever, to throw morality completely out of the window if those things get in the way of plundering and exploiting and stealing from other countries, specifically their resources. And in Gaza's case, the gas and the oil reserves that have been recently discovered. That's one thing that distinguishes them. But the other thing that personally I find extremely disturbing is that the state of Israel in particular commits these crimes in God's name, which I have a great deal of time wrapping my head around that. The God of the Old Testament, although he clearly showed military favoritism to his chosen people, did not in any way, as far as I know, direct Benjamin Netanyahu to carry out these kinds of operations against children. If he did, he really ought to let us know about it. And I don't understand the theology that would justify this type of aggression and this type of warfare in God's name. And so I think that when we're talking about a way forward, the way forward here is the way that we always move forward in any kind of global crisis, and that is to put it in the hands of the people, the masses of people. Politicians are not going to resolve this. Government officials are not going to resolve this. The corporations, for darn sure, are not going to resolve this. It falls to the people. And I think that when we say the people, it includes everybody who's a person of goodwill, and in particular, people of the Jewish faith, I would think. I mean, I'm not Jewish, but my Christian orientation rests on a Jewish foundation. And I'm personally offended that this is being carried out in the name of God. And I think that there are an ever-growing number of people who are sincere in their Jewish faith who are offended by it. And I think that as these voices are elevated, and people who don't even have a particular religious commitment, but who do have a sense of morality, a sense of justice, as these people start to raise their voices and come forward, then we break this lock that the Zionists and the imperialists have had on the thinking of much of the world when it comes to this particular conflict. We just have to keep talking, and we have to keep mobilizing, and eventually the message gets through. There is a point when there is a breaking point when people just have had enough. There is a cycle of violence, and it's an endless cycle. As long as the response to violence is more violence, then it only escalates it. And so those who are now calling for a ceasefire, those who are calling for peace, are the voices, are righteous voices that need to be amplified at every opportunity. But I think that, as I mentioned the last time we were here, I think it's not just a question of bringing about a peace. There also has to be justice. And so the job does not end with accomplishing a ceasefire if and when we do that. We have to look at what's just in that situation. And what's just in that situation is justice for the Palestinians who are indigenous to that territory. And as long as they continue to try and just suppress them, there will be continuing war.
Attorney C.K. Hoffler, we only have about 3.5 minutes left here. We've got Dr. Francis Boyle who's going to come up and talk to us, one of your and, the colleague of all three of you. Indeed, he represented the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina, arguing their genocide case against Yugoslavia. You should stay and hear him. In fact, he was Congressman Jackson's professor in law school. And every time I speak with him, he talks about that because Jesse was quite the impressive student. And then we've got young Raed Jarrar. He is heading the organization founded by Jamal Khashoggi and Democracy for the Arab World. I want to hear what they have got to say, CK. I mean, because we're getting this one-sided coverage, and you're a commentator on television now. The one-sided coverage is not helping us. In fact, it's hurting us. And when because I have to go to all of these different sources, CK, because and Reverend Dr. Yuri and Attorney Mark Fancher. Attorney Fancher, I was sharing with Attorney C.K. Hoffler and Reverend Dr. Todd Yuri, who's also an attorney. I said, look, I was looking at Tucker Carlson. Yes, I watch him. I watch him every night because I want to hear what they've got. He and others. I listen to Joe Rogan. I listen to everybody because I want information. You can have your opinion. I get the information, then I go and make and form my own. But Lieutenant Colonel Douglas McGregor has given a lot of very great information, and he's one of these high-ranking veterans who is he's very supportive of Israel. He said, but as Israel's friend, we've got to tell them when they're in error because they're going to hurt themselves here. He said, when a friend is about to commit suicide, you do everything you can to stop it. He said, and sustaining this conflict is going to hurt them in terms of goodwill around the world. And you've got Turkey. Turkey's got 4 million people they can put on the ground right now, CK. And then when he said that there are one of the largest cells of Hezbollah in the world is in Mexico, I said, wait a minute, what? CK, Reverend Yuri, Mark Fancher, Attorney Fancher. I said, wait. Wait, that means they're right here. Huh?
Well, I think that it's there are people who are fighting for liberation, however they may define it, who are establishing global networks now. The world is not as compartmentalized and as regionalized as it once was, and I think that certainly I wish victory to anybody who is honestly and sincerely and morally and ethically pursuing their fight for liberation. But that always spells doom for oppressors. And I think that the advice that was given to the state of Israel about the threat that it faces is good advice. Justice cannot be suppressed. It will always overcome. It will always prevail. It may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen next week. But people crave justice. They have to have it, and they will not stop fighting for it until they achieve it. So no justice, you get no peace.
Well, Reverend Dr. Yuri, we have heard that the book of Revelations, if it is true, and I believe God can do anything but lie, God has already won. I think we better get on God's side. What you think?
Well, I think we often blame God for the unjustified actions of human will. To make this a matter of religion, I think, is flawed. There's a religious piece to it, but the motivation is more of
it's political, isn't it?
The desire. Well, it's political, but it's also control of land.
But that's
often thinking about this.
That's
Well, but here's where I want to kind of go with it. The arbitrary drawing of boundaries that give us national identities is no longer as static as we once thought. Right? The issues of connection around human need make the boundary control less viable, and so this notion of an expanding interest and solidarity across identities is happening, which is going to make it much more difficult to control the human spirit and the human will. And so if God is telling you to take land, right, because you have been told this is your land, and you can use whatever means you think it might be viable to do so, then you, as Big Brother Dwight McKee, if you throw it to the wind, you reap the whirlwind. It's coming back, and it's going to come back in a way that is much more ferocious than what we see right now. And the bombs that are being dropped, let's be real clear, the intensity of the bombs being dropped were learned from the U.S. in the drone issue during the Obama administration. So I'll leave it there.
Oh, let's talk about a bomb drop. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Thank you so much. Ooh, I know I'm rolling through, but you all should hear what they have to say. Excuse me. About that. I've got so many papers. Oh.
Santita?
Yes.
Santita. Okay. I want to tune in. I'm very, very interested in hearing the discussion. I'm going to have to put, with my segment really being almost over, I was going to put it on mute.
Okay.
Because I'm multitasking, if that's okay. But I absolutely want to hear, because there are a lot of discussions, just so you know, in law school, amongst students. I mean, I think we forget about how this is affecting our young folks. That are, we're training leaders and all that for the future. And I can tell you the impact is very, very severe on these young folks, very severe. And I think when you're looking at just, how we interact with everyday people, we are fighting a different war in the street, without a question.
Oh, yeah.
But that war, we remember what it felt like when we had 9/11, how vulnerable we felt, how insecure we felt. And I think, and again, our goal and our purpose is to have the dialogue and also to let people, to have our listeners understand how serious this is. This is not something to be taken lightly, as our young men and women have already been deployed. And again, I don't need to have any official statement by any government official to let us know the kids have been deployed. They have been deployed because many of us have families. So I think that it will be interesting to have a panel of people from different. We're more of academic intellectual practitioners, people who are in the space for one reason or another. I think it'd be interesting to have a panel of how college students, how high school students, how younger people, the leaders, the people who are voting, who are making a difference, the people who made a difference, for instance, in the Georgia election.
Hi, Ms. Jackson.
About this.
Hold
We
on.
have Dr.
CK, hold on 1 second. Let me greet my guests as I bring them on. Dr. Boyle.
Yes, I'm here.
90
wonderful. And we have got Mr. Gerard.
Yes, I'm here too. Good morning.
I am so glad that you're here. I want you to, we have got Attorney Mark Fancher from National Conference of Black Lawyers. They're listening in, just so that you know. And he's also a great civil libertarian out of Michigan. He's with the ACLU. He has the Racial Justice Project, but he's not here in that capacity today. We've got Reverend Dr. Todd Uries from the National Leadership Team of Rainbow Push, senior pastor of one of our iconic churches, Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore. And then we've got the former head of the largest and oldest Black Bar Association in the world, the National Bar Association. She's also the chair of Rainbow Push.
60 seconds.
And she is a legal analyst on Court TV and has her own radio show on WAOK down in Atlanta. Attorney C.K. Hoffler. They all wanted to listen to you, Dr. Boyle, and to you, Mr. Gerard. I'm so excited to have you on. I had you on Reverend Jackson's Keep Hope Alive show some years ago, but I'm glad that you've returned, Mr. Gerard. And he, of course, is the advocacy director for the Democracy for the Arab World Now organization, which was founded by the late, just great journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and of course, Dr. Francis Boyle. Beloved to me, he was my brother's law school professor, and my brother, former Congressman Jackson, sends his love and regards to you. Said you were a brilliant professor, but he also represented, Mr. Gerard, the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina in their genocide case against Yugoslavia. So, talking about this this horrific bombing, but I'm going to
change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. We need a ceasefire. We need a ceasefire now. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Everybody like and share. Let us get this information out here, everybody. This brilliant young man wrote this opinion piece that really it's a guidepost. A ceasefire would save countless lives in Gaza, including hostages. Raed Gerard writes, amid Israel's relentless bombing campaign in Gaza is a crisis within a crisis, the presence of many hostages, including U.S. citizens held captive in a war zone. According to the latest Israeli estimates, Hamas and other Palestinian groups are holding more than 200 people hostage following their attack last week in southern Israel. And one has to wonder, when 2/3 of the American public want a ceasefire, why will not Congress vote that way? It's because of money. Many of our congresspersons are being held hostage by private money, by lobbying money, or the promise from these different groups that don't want a ceasefire that they will run someone against them, and they find candidates that are more and more perfect each time. So we got to talk about that today. We have to talk about what happened with this bombing in this refugee camp. How do you drop a bomb on a refugee camp? A bomb that's so powerful that you said we knew that this gentleman we're looking for, the leader of Hamas, was not in the camp, but he was below. So you had to drop bombs that were so powerful that you just pulverized the camp and the people in them. Got to talk about that. What happened here? What happened here? We've got Dr. Francis Boyle, who's been with us. He was with us earlier this week. Indeed, he's one of the leading scholars in international law from the University of Illinois. He represented the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina in their genocide case against Yugoslavia. So he has a lot of experience in this space. But let me start with you, Mr. Gerard, Advocacy Director for the Democracy for the Arab World Now organization. What about this bombing yesterday? And what do you make of it? And why aren't we calling for a ceasefire, Mr. Gerard?
Well, that's a good question to ask the Biden administration, because the vast majority of the U.S. public are asking for a ceasefire. The most recent polls I've seen indicate that 80% of Democrats, more than 50% of Republicans support a ceasefire. The entire world has spoken out in support of a ceasefire. The UN General Assembly voted overwhelmingly to support a ceasefire and stopping the hostilities. It's a good question to ask the Biden administration. What happened yesterday in the Jabalia camp is honestly just an example of what has been going on in Gaza in the past 3 or 4 weeks. Israel is using excessive force that has killed killed over 8,000 Palestinians, including around 3,500 children. The number of children killed by Israel in the past 3 weeks in Gaza, which is a population of 2 million people, very, very small. They killed 3,500 children. And that number exceeds the number of kids who have been killed globally on planet Earth for the past 4 years of conflict. Like imagine 7 billion people who live on this planet. Like the numbers are really staggering when you see the level of excessive force used by Israel. And of course, this is happening not in a vacuum. These bombs are falling within a bigger system of collective punishment of Palestinians. Israel has cut off electricity, water, medicine, and food, which is a war crime, especially taking in consideration that Israel is an occupying force that has the responsibility for providing such services to the Palestinian populations in Gaza. And now they're talking about a plan to expel all 2 million Palestinians from Gaza to Egypt, to the Sinai Desert. This plan has been discussed for a while, and now we have actual evidence that the Israeli cabinet has a paper, a document, a memo that was leaked by local newspapers where they discussed the details of the plan. Yesterday, there were news about Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is not only a corrupt politician and a war criminal, but also, has been involved in attempts for ethnic cleansing in Palestinians for decades. There were news yesterday that he actually is trying to get the World Bank to forgive billions of dollars of Egypt's debt in return to Egypt accepting the 2 million Palestinian residents of Gaza as refugees. So this is a really horrific, terrifying situation. We're really living the days where a second Nakba, as we call it, the Palestinians, the second catastrophe of displacement is happening before our own eyes. And our government here in the U.S. is not only supporting Israeli plans. There are some indications that they're willing to fund it. The White House has asked for actual funding, $100 million of what the White House calls humanitarian aid. But that humanitarian aid is at least in part dedicated to building infrastructure in neighboring countries to receive Palestinians who are being ethnically cleansed. So like imagine, like not only we're not, playing a positive role, we're not calling for a ceasefire, but also my tax dollars and your tax dollars are also going to support and bankroll this ongoing ethnic cleansing in Palestine.
We're talking with Raed Gerard, the Advocacy Director for Democracy for the Arab World Now. What did you make of the hearings yesterday with Anthony Blinken, Secretary Blinken, and the interruptions? I mean, I think many people were surprised. At least the corporate media appeared to be surprised. I was not, because I think there's much more. As you said, the majority of the American public want a ceasefire at the very least. And yet, the corporate media always express surprise when they see the resistance. Mr. Gerard.
I was very disappointed by Secretary Blinken's posture and testimony. He's asking for more bombs for Israel at the time that Israel is committing war crimes and crimes against humanity using our bombs. And he's asking for band-aids for Palestinians. Like that is the dynamic. Bombs for Israel, band-aids for Palestinians. This is unacceptable. Not only because it is a moral failing of this administration, not only because the U.S. Foreign policy is depleting our political capital with the Muslim world, with the Arab world, but also because of the legal liability for Blinken, for President Biden, and other U.S. officials. We're not joking around here. These are very serious war crimes and crimes against humanity. The International Criminal Court is investigating these crimes because Gaza and the Palestinian territories fall within the jurisdiction of the ICC. And under the Rome Statute, funding and aiding and abetting war crimes and crimes against humanity makes you a partner in these crimes under Article 25 of the Rome Statute. So we're talking about a situation where U.S. officials are individually liable for war crimes and crimes against humanity. If the ICC, when the ICC starts looking into these crimes, they're not only going to look into crimes by Israeli officials, they're going to look into crimes by U.S. officials. Why? Why are we doing this? Why are we spending our money and treasure and political capital to support an apartheid state that is killing civilians and committing war crimes? Why would we do that? It's not in the national interest of the United States to do this. It's not in our interest to continue the racist policies of Israel. It's not in our interest to support this war and push it to become a regional, maybe world war. It's not in our interest. Like our calls here in Washington, D.C. for the Biden administration to support a ceasefire are not solely based on humanitarian reasons, not just because we're being nice to Palestinians who are being killed, but because a ceasefire is in the interest of our country. We cannot and should not be spending billions or more dollars to support Israel's war crimes. We should not send Israel more money for more bombs. We should not be bankrolling ethnic cleansing and the continuation of the murder of Palestinians. And that's why we will say this every single day. Cease fire now. This madness has to end now.
Dr. Francis Boyle. Professor Boyle, help us to understand what we saw yesterday, because that's been particularly horrifying to people. But we have a series of these. We have more than 3,500 children who've been killed, more than 8,000 persons who've been killed. What can be done?
Well,
Max Myrick.
thank you.
Yes, please. Max Myrick asked the question, what can be done to end this genocide? I quote him.
Well, thank you, Santita. Yeah, you did ask me to speak about the bombing of the Jabalia refugee camp. And according to Al Jazeera latest report, they just bombed it again. As I said in my last interview, what we see here are Nuremberg crimes under the Nuremberg Charter of 1945 that the United States government used to prosecute the major Nazi war criminals. And let me quote Article 6B of the Nuremberg Charter, defining war crimes, Nazi war crimes, as, quote, wanton destruction of cities, towns, or villages, unquote, wanton destruction of cities, towns, and villages. And that is what we have seen since basically October 8 here, all over Gaza, Nazi war crimes. Now, as for the bombing of Jabalia yesterday, and we have not heard the Zionist propaganda justifying bombing today. But yesterday, the Israeli government said, well, there was a Hamas commander in a tunnel, and so we had to bomb the refugee camp. The test for such situations is found in Article 57 of Additional Protocol 1 to the four Geneva Conventions of 1949. Most states in the world are parties to this Additional Protocol 1. The United States is not, but even the United States government has taken the position that this is customary international law, customary international criminal law. And let me read here Article 57, precautions in attack. In the conduct of military operations, constant care shall be taken to spare the civilian population civilians and civilian objects. And then small Roman numeral 3 is directly on point. Those who plan or decide an attack shall, quote, refrain from deciding to launch any attack which may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, damage to civilian objects, or a combination thereof, which would be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantages anticipated. So that is the relevant test of international law, international criminal law. Even the United States government agrees with that. And clearly, you cannot justify bombing a refugee camp, murdering at least 50 people, the current estimate we have as of this morning, injuring hundreds more, and now a second bombing this morning reported. We don't have the casualty figures there. It's clearly a war crime under customary international criminal law. And as we discussed on the last program I was on with you, this clearly qualifies as a genocide in violation of the 1948 Genocide Act the 1948 Genocide Convention, that Article 2, killing members of the group, well, that's for sure. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, that's for sure. And then here, overall, as Mr. Gerard was saying, the overall situation there on Gaza, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Clearly, the Zionists have cut off food, water, humanitarian relief supplies, fuel, etc. Certainly deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. I should also point out that the United States has domestic implementing legislation for the Genocide Convention, known as the Genocide Convention Implementation Act, which, in my opinion, could be used against Biden and Blinken and the rest of them for aiding and abetting genocide under United States law. And finally, we come, as Mr. Gerard pointed out, to the Rome Statute for the International Criminal Court. Palestine is a contracting party to this convention, and therefore all these crimes by Israel, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, are crimes under the Rome Statute for the International Criminal Court, and U.S. government officials aiding and abetting are also subject to criminal prosecution by the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. As for crimes against humanity, I won't go through the whole, panoply here. But when you have war crimes that are widespread or systematic, they constitute crimes against humanity, and clearly we have that as well. So that is the legal situation, except one footnote. There are about 130 state parties to the Rome Statute for the International Criminal Court, and they are all required to have domestic implementing legislation for Rome Statute crimes. So that means that U.S. government officials and certainly Israeli government officials could be prosecuted in theory, by any Rome Statute state where they show up.
Mr. Gerard, what is the path forward? I mean, what can we saw the demonstrators making their opinions and their voices known at the Senate hearings yesterday. That was a good thing. We see more and more people, quite frankly, demonstrating and protesting. What is next? I mean, because we're also seeing blowback. You're seeing a lot of Jewish, they're saying there's a spike in anti-Semitism, but there's also a spike in Islamophobia. You're seeing pro-Palestinian students or students who just treat Palestinians fairly. they're being told they're not going to get jobs. They're under investigation. Students, what's the path forward? And what can the press do to expose this and to make this right?
I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet. Unfortunately, it seems like what's next is going to be even worse. Yesterday, we woke up to the news about the Virginia Attorney General announcing an investigation into one of the largest Palestinian groups in the U.S., American Muslims of Palestine. It seems like literal harassment and intimidation for the organization. We've heard reports about harassment of Palestinian students in the United States by ICE, by the FBI, a number of U.S. senators and presidential candidates have been trying to create a chilling effect by saying that any students who protest against the war on Gaza will be deported. So we're getting to a point where action is very necessary, and this is not an issue to put the burden on Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims to defend themselves in our country. It's an issue that every American has to be involved in the protection of our civil liberties here in the U.S. Because this is not just about what's going on in Gaza. It's not just about something happening 10,000 miles away. It's in the here and now. Last month, we saw a horrific attack by an older landlord,
Mr. Zuba,
against.
Yes, about the 6-year-old here just outside of Chicago.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. Outside of Chicago, he killed a 6-year-old Palestinian boy, yelled profanities about Muslims, and that barely got any attention, honestly, in the media. Imagine the media coverage if it was the other way around. Mm-hmm. If it was a Muslim landlord who stabbed a Jewish boy who was 6 years old, it would have been a very different response. I assure you that the U.S. government would have moved law enforcement around the country to protect, Jewish community members here and there. But the fact that there is an older Jewish man who would stab a 6-year-old Palestinian Muslim boy, obviously in a hate crime that is related to what's going on in Israel-Palestine, barely gets any attention. So there is definitely a lot going on here at home. Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims are under attack, and there will be even more under attack by our own government, by methods of intimidation, and standing up for them is important. Internationally, it's important to also pressure our government to end the madness. This is not just something that we're watching on our TVs. We are involved in the war. We're literally paying for it. I'm paying for it as a U.S. citizen and a taxpayer. I think almost everyone who's listening to this show is paying for it. Like we're contributing to these crimes, and the least we can do is call our representatives, members of Congress, to say no more dollars to Israel and vote for a ceasefire. It's insane. This is the lowest thing, the lowest hanging fruit. The easiest thing we can do is to just call the White House today, call the State Department. If the State Department has a comment line now, you can leave a comment there with the State Department, and of course call your representative and 2 senators to say we oppose sending any more weapons, any more money. This $14.3 billion bill that is being debated in Congress this week is literal insanity. We cannot spend more money to Israel. The $14.3 billion bill that is being debated includes giving Israel U.S. weapons. It also includes giving Israel $3.5 billion of cash that they would buy their own weapons. Can you believe this? We never do this with any other countries in the world. Why would we give Israel $3.5 billion to subsidize them buying their own weapons? We have no end-use monitoring. We have no idea what they're using the weapons for. It's actually a breach of U.S. law to give foreign nations money that we can't track and trace where it's being used. Unbelievable, the level of lack of accountability. The blank check to Israel that continues to happen in Congress is literally unbelievable. So that's what I'm saying. This is time for action. And it's time for us to say these things over and over again. Not once, not twice, not 3 times. Every day. We have to call Congress every day and call the White House every day and demand an immediate stop of the attack on Palestinians in Gaza. Demand an immediate stop on the attack on Arab and Muslim and Palestinian communities here at home.
If you would stay here just for a couple more minutes, because my audience want to hear just a little bit more from you. And Dr. Boyle, if you could do that. Mark Fancher, if you're still there. I know CK has to go and get on television today. Check her out on Court TV. And Reverend Dr. Todd Geary. I want to ask about whether this is in America's best interest. I think we as Americans have to ask that question. Yes, be a little selfish about it. Got to do that. Just trying to figure out why we're doing this. It's not helping anybody. No one anywhere in the world, except the munitions industry. They're making money. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Thank you, Henry, for a great show. Much love to WCPT and AM 950 Radio. God bless you, Morning Stars. Stay right here with me. I'll see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show, and on Sunday at the Jackson Town Hall meeting on what? Migration. South Shore Cultural Center. Go to Congressman Jackson's website so you can get more information. Back tomorrow. Dr. Boyle, Professor Boyle.
Yes.
Is this in America's interest? Yes. How are we tied? It seems like we're tied. We're locked in. I'm trying to figure out what is going on here.
It's Zionist power, Zionist money, Zionist media control. That's what's going on here.
Where do you see that going? I mean, because people are beginning to talk about that, and that is that could become dangerous talk for the Jewish community, I think.
That's correct. The longer this goes on, Santita, I believe the more acts of anti-Semitism we're going to see, and also acts of Islamophobia. Mr. Gerard was correct on that. That's correct. And that's why my opinion is that I don't mean any disrespect, but Arab Americans have little power here in America. Muslim Americans have little power. African Americans have enormous power. And I just think that and Operation Rainbow Push, you're the experts on people power. So I just think African Americans are going to have to, even though you don't have a horse in the race, in this race, I don't either. I'm Irish American. I'm just trying to look at it objectively. But I really think African Americans are going to have to move forward here and get organized. And certainly we must have a ceasefire. Well, because as Mr. Gerard pointed out, yes, it's going to get worse. Well, it's going to get worse.
Well, as human beings, we do. I mean, when Reverend Jackson ran for president, Mr. Gerard, I don't know if you were old enough to I don't even know if you were alive when he did it. He took massive hits for calling for Israeli security and Palestinian justice, because you had a no-talk policy at that time, and you dare not mention at that time the word Palestinian. And when he and my mother went to the Middle East, my mother went first in 1979, and then they went later in 79. I mean, we just got we were subjected to not just extraordinary criticisms, but massive threats. It impacted my interview with Harvard University, even though I was not planning to go there. And when I was accepted there, they said I was accepted, Dr. Boyle, in spite of my father. Now I'm a merit scholar. They called me Dr. Boyle. I didn't call them.
Who was that?
This was Harvard. This was Harvard University, right? And and then of course the group that came after Reverend during his campaigns. It was the same group, and it was like, wait a minute, as your friends, we're trying to help you. If you continue down the path that you're on, I mean, abusing your power this way, you're going to be hurt. And now I almost feel like we've crossed the Rubicon, Mr. Gerard. And I don't know if Mark Fancher is there. I don't know if Reverend
Yeah,
Dr. Uri, if you're still at Mark. I mean, what have you heard from Mr.
yeah.
Gerard and from Dr. Boyle?
No, I think both are brilliant, and I've very much appreciated their comments. I do want to raise the question, though, about whether Africans in America really have power. I think that what they have is a degree of influence. They have positions within the structure that many groups don't have. But power, as I define it, means that whatever it is that you want to do, you can do it, and nobody's going to get in your way. And I think that the Zionists and the imperialists are certainly still capable of crushing anything that anybody does. I think that what we have to recognize and can't lose sight of is the fact that certainly it is not in the interest of the people of the U.S. It's not in the interest of anybody on the planet for this kind of thing to go on. But it is in the interest of capitalism. It is in the interest of imperialism. It is in the interest of Zionism for these things to continue. And capitalist, imperialist, Zionists, they really don't care about the rest of us. They are hell-bent on getting control of resources by whatever means it takes. And despite how much death and destruction is involved, they are going to get it. That's their commitment. And so I think that, if we begin in our resistance to this, to somehow lapse into thinking that this situation in Gaza is a unique one, an isolated one, then we risk having the same types of events unfold in other parts of the planet, where the circumstances are similar in terms of resources that imperialism has targeted, and where there would always be the inevitable resistance to that type of effort and the resulting death, destruction, and warfare. So I think we all benefit as a human family in drawing a line and saying that, these evil forces, the imperialists, the Zionists, the exploiters, and the oppressors, they're on one side. All of the rest of us are on the other side, and together we're going to crush them.
Well, let me ask you this, because I've heard, Mr. Gerard, are you still there? He might have left. But, I've heard some, some people who I guess you would call them Black nationalists, for want of another term, Attorney Fancher, say, we don't have a dog in this fight. We don't have a dog in this hunt. No one cries for African children. We don't have this kind of hue and cry for Black people. But when you go onto the continent of Africa, they have a very, very different take on this. I mean, the South Africans have a very, very different take on this. The Kenyans have a different take on this. So, what do you think about that?
Oh, yeah. No, there's a reason for that, and that is that people don't talk about it, but the Israeli state aided, abetted, and sustained the apartheid regime in South Africa for a great deal of time. Mm-hmm. And not only that, the Israeli military has backed oppressive forces that have been counter to the interests of African people. And then you go beyond that and look at what the Palestinians have done for African liberation movements. They have always stood in solidarity. Mm-hmm. The Palestinians have stood in solidarity with African liberation, and African people know that. And so it is all connected. I mean, it is only natural that they would stand in solidarity because they share the same enemies. They're facing the same kinds of opposition to the simple effort to achieve freedom, to achieve the type of life that we all aspire to. So nothing is disconnected anyway. But with respect to this conflict that's happening in Gaza, it definitely has implications for Black people everywhere. And, it must be a priority struggle that we focus our attention on.
Well, I just had to say that because I saw several videos yesterday that I said, wait a minute, historically, you don't know what you're talking about, because when you go to the continent, Dr. Boyle, you hear, and I've been going there for 5 decades. You would hear them talk about Castro. You would hear them talk about Arafat. You would hear them speak of Mandela. They would all be in the same breath because they were like, wait, wait, wait. And they were all, you were seeing Cubans all over the continent helping to fight these anti-colonial struggles, Attorney Fancher and Professor Boyle. And so when I saw this series of videos yesterday, I was very dismayed. Because I said, wait a minute, we all have a dog in this hunt. We all do. And Americans have money in it. We're paying for it.
Just one other anecdote that I think is really important to this point, and that is that when Ferguson went up in flames, and people were in the streets chanting Black Lives Matter and fighting back against police oppression, Palestinian youth were communicating with the people in the streets by social media and explaining to them how they can deal with tear gas and how they can deal with the efforts by the police to suppress their demonstrations. Okay. That's real life solidarity that you see demonstrated, and which is really critical in this type of a struggle.
Well, I don't know how heavily you monitor social media, but that's out there. And I said, well, you're missing something here, my friend. And this is a guy who I listen to. I think he's, makes some good points. I don't have to agree with them all the time. I'm all right with that. But I said, first of all, this is a human issue. And when you talk about the global South, and there is, Kenya is pushing the elimination of visas for all Africans who travel across the continent. They said all these borders are artificial anyway. So, it's I think, it's just a new world. It's just a new world. It's just a new world. I think there's something else that's happening here. Professor Boyle, is there anything you'd like to say before we go?
Yes, Santita, I agree completely with the analysis of the previous speaker. What we're seeing here is white racist Western colonial imperialism in operation, and Israel is their outpost there in the Middle East. There's no question about it. But let me give one insight from my own personal experience. Namely, I had traveled all up and down occupied Palestine in 1986, and I went into the highest level officials to complain. First, in the military occupation, where I told this military official, I said, look, I've been all over occupied Palestine, and you are inflicting Nuremberg crimes on the Palestinian people. And he didn't disagree with me. And what he said is, we have public relations people in the United States who take care of this matter for us. Then I went to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, accusing them of Nuremberg crimes, Nazi crimes against the Palestinians. And he gave me the same answer. He didn't disagree. He said, we have public relations people in the United States who take care of these matters for us. Then I went to the Ministry of Justice, and the top person in charge of occupied Palestinian territory, I accused them of committing Nuremberg Nazi crimes against the Palestinians, and he gave me the same answer. We have public relations people in the United States who take care of these matters for us. So my conclusion was, all they care about in Israel is public relations issues here in the United States. And so it's really up to us to turn public relations around against what they are doing to the Palestinians. And certainly as an immediate step, we need a ceasefire. There's no question about it. There must be a ceasefire as soon as possible.
And, and we're the ones with the power to do it. I think we're the ones who have the power to do it. You know what, Mark? I saw it during Reverend Jackson's campaigns because I would venture to say he's as responsible as anyone for getting, Palestinians a voice at the table. You didn't dare mention Palestinians in public discourse. until the Jackson campaign. And it's going to take that kind of solidarity. And I think, and I'm glad that you mentioned what happened in Ferguson. And whenever we have these kind of conflagrations, you will see, I have been to the Palestinian territories. I've been to Palestine. When Reverend is greeted as a hero, they come out with the pictures, Jesse, Jesse, Jesse. And it makes me cry. It just makes me cry because I see them, not because he's my father, but because I see them identifying with, they see the struggle and they're with it. They're with it. These people are living in the largest open air prison in the world, everybody. That ought to concern you. And it's our money that's making it happen. They're being pushed out of their ancestral homeland. It ought to concern you. There were no bodies left there yesterday, Mark. They were pulverized.
Santita, you left out one critical fact, though, maybe because you're a loving daughter. It's not just that your dad did what he did, but and accomplished what he accomplished in terms of elevating the Palestinian struggle, but he took hits for it. He took blows for it, serious blows for it. And I think that all of us need to be prepared to do that. Freedom doesn't come without, this type of struggle and that type of redemptive suffering. And, when the Palestinians fall out into the streets and celebrate him, they know what he went through, and because they're going through it too. And that's what solidarity is all about, being willing to face and endure the suffering of those who are targeted.
Maybe that's why he's got
Mark,
Parkinson's
let me say
now. He's got the fighter's disease, and that's okay. I'm okay with it. I really am. Now, Professor Boyle, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, well, I was saying when I entered Harvard in 1971, I was an ardent supporter of the Palestinians. And ever since then, Zionists have accused me of being everything but a child molester and have treated me accordingly. So that's just the way the game gets played. And yes, we have to be prepared to take hits. I've lost a lot of, I've been completely blackballed out of the legal profession. I've lost money, you name it. But that's the price. As your father has paid, I've paid, others have paid.
But my brother said that about
have
you.
To do it.
Why have you been willing to do that? What arced your thinking in this direction so long ago, Professor Boyle?
Well, Santita, I'm Irish, and my grandfather volunteered to fight with the Irish Republican Army against Great Britain for the independence and freedom of Ireland, and my grandmother helped him. The IRA was the first national liberation movement of the 20th century, and I am proud of it. So that's the background I come from.
So you got to America and didn't forget. that's what happened.
And I think it's that kind of thing that links these struggles, which is why it's so important for us to not say that we don't have a dog in this fight. I mean, because, the Irish, will point out correctly that many of the methods and the tactics that were used by British colonizers in Africa were practiced on the Irish. Okay, and so we have shared oppressors, and this is all linked globally. And for us to say that as the oppressed, for people who are targets of this, that we're somehow compartmentalized is a grave error.
Well, that I'm telling you, that's what some people are trying to spread. And I said, no, you're missing something, because these are people who have stood with us. And when you go, when Reverend has gone his last trip to Ireland, he's received as a hero. They named, I think, some street and park after him. Not the least of which, Mr. Boyle, because Professor Boyle, because he's part Irish. They were able to. They didn't have to track it. My grandmother was raised by her Irish grandfather in part. But but there you have it. We are linked, everybody. We're linked. These struggles are linked. We're all fighting the same oppressive forces. If you want to hear a real anti-imperialist argument, you need to listen to an Irish Republican. That's what you need to do, Professor Boyle. I fell in love with this man. We were at a conference over in England. Mark, I love my brothers, but let me tell you, Mr. Man was talking such cash on demand trash. I looked at my mother and said, I love him. I'm going to stay behind in England. I'm going to marry him. She looked at me. She said, I understand. Oh, he was so clear on the forces that have oppressed us all. And so I just think it's important for us to, there's something that's happened. Remember, Secretary Blinken, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, made him wait overnight. Huh? Oh my gosh. Something is happening, y'all. Something is happening. As my father said, land is changing hands. And you know what? You're right. Mark Fancher and Professor Boyle, you got to be ready to take the hits, because I know you've lost a lot of money, but Earth's loss is heaven's gain. So I am just honored that I'm honored that you make the time to be on this show, Professor Boyle, and I'm honored that you're part of this family, and I'm so glad that my brother was shaped in part by you. So excited that he had that opportunity. May God continue to bless you, and I can't wait to have you back. I know he's like, oh no, but Attorney Mark Fancher, I adore you, and I just thank you. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we go?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground, so I'm gonna
I think we did.
Bid farewell for the moment.
All right. Well, they say bye for now, but thank you. I think we did cover a lot of ground, and I thank you for being with us today, because you make the show. You make the show, and this is a discussion that we need to be having in more places. But I'm glad that we can have it here, and I thank WCPT for giving me the space to do that, and I thank you for giving me and all of us your time. I'm so grateful to all of you Morning Stars, and to all of you who are in the listening audience, because you've pushed the numbers for the show way up, and we do it for you. We do it for you, and so may God bless you. God bless you, Professor Boyle. God bless you, Mark Fancher.
Sure.
Reverend
And
Dr.
your father's been an inspiration to all of us. Your father's been an inspiration to all of us, all human beings, not just African Americans.
Oh, look, he belongs to the world, and thank you for that. But
He does. Sure.
He belongs to the world. He belongs to the world, and I just thank God that he came this way through all of us, because it has taken all of these different people and all of these different expressions, all of these different experiences in his life that shaped him into who he is. So he came through the Black American experience. He is Black American, no question, but it helped him to have a global view, just as your view, as someone who came through imperialism, as a person as an Irishman. We're supposed to use these experiences, Dr. Boyle and Attorney Fancher. We're supposed to use these experiences not to get stuck here in our silos. We're supposed to go out and say, okay, wait a minute. As a Black person, I understand. As a woman, I understand. I understand oppression. You're not supposed to get stuck here. You're supposed to use it. You're supposed to use what happened to you to lift somebody else. And the best of us do that. I've seen some Jewish people doing it. They use their experience or the experiences of their ancestors to say, hey, never again for anybody. That's what needs to happen, not just never again for me. So let's grow up in our politics, everybody. Let's grow up spiritually, more than that. And let's grow in God and grow in grace. May God bless you. May God bless all of you. And again, I want to thank you, Mark Fancher, for always standing in God and in principle. And I thank you for standing in the highest and best of your tradition, Dr. Boyle. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Because indeed, the green in our red, black, and green flag comes from Ireland. I know that. That's how connected we are. So God bless you, and God bless everybody. Have a great day, and thank you all for giving me a little bit more time today, because I know you've given me a whole lot anyway. God bless you. God bless you, Mark Fancher. God bless you, Professor Boyle. Sending you much love today, and have a great one, everybody.
Sure.
Love you
You
so
too.
much. Bye-bye.
God bless.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.